Over the past few years, something extraordinary happened across the Sunbelt. These cities, bathed in sunshine and political favor, became the promised land for millions of Americans desperate to escape high taxes, cold weather, and suffocating regulations. From Texas to Florida, from Arizona to the Carolinas, investors poured billions into real estate, convinced the migration wave would never end. Developers broke ground on massive apartment complexes. House flippers bought everything in sight. Corporate landlords snapped up entire neighborhoods, sight unseen. The narrative was simple and seductive. People were done with the old cities, and the Sun Belt represented America's future. But in 2025, that story is crumbling. The boom that felt unstoppable just months ago has slammed into reverse. Investors who rushed in during the frenzy are now racing for the exits. Properties that were supposed to generate passive income forever are bleeding cash. Rent growth has stalled, vacancies are climbing, and in some markets, prices are falling off a cliff. The cities that symbolized opportunity and endless expansion are now littered with half-empty luxury towers, stalled construction sites, and desperate sellers willing to take massive losses just to get out. If you want to understand what's really happening in America's housing market right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we're counting down the top 10 Sunbelt cities where the housing boom just reversed and investors are fleeing faster than they arrived. Let's dive in. Number 10, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville never had the glamour of Miami or the tech buzz of Austin, but for a while it had something better: affordability paired with rapid growth. The city became a magnet for families priced out of South Florida and retirees looking for beach access without the astronomical price tags. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices surged more than 45%, and investors flooded in, betting on continued appreciation. Developers lined the riverfront with upscale condos. Suburban sprawl exploded outward in every direction. But by early 2025, the momentum has vanished. Home sales have dropped nearly 30% compared to the previous year. Properties are sitting on the market twice as long as they did during the peak. And the investors who bought expecting quick flips are now stuck holding properties they can't unload without taking serious losses. Part of the problem is oversupply. Builders kept constructing long after demand began cooling. Now there are thousands of brand new homes competing for a shrinking pool of buyers. Insurance costs, already high across Florida, have become unbearable in Jacksonville. Premiums have doubled or even tripled, wiping out any potential profit for landlords and making homeownership feel like a gamble. The job market, once a bright spot, is also softening. Major employers who relocated during the pandemic are slowing their hiring or pulling back entirely. Without the steady influx of new workers, the housing market has lost its foundation. Investors who thought Jacksonville was a safe bet are learning the hard way that no market is immune when the fundamentals shift. Rental properties that once filled immediately are now sitting vacant for months. Small landlords are quietly exiting, selling to whoever will take them. The river still flows, the beaches still glow, but the financial tide has turned. And Jacksonville is feeling the weight of expectations it could never realistically meet. Number 9, Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte spent years positioning itself as the New South's financial capital, a polished blend of corporate headquarters, affordable living, and Southern charm. Banks built gleaming towers downtown. Tech companies opened regional offices, and transplants from the Northeast poured in, drawn by lower taxes and a thriving job scene. Housing prices responded predictably, climbing faster than wages and stretching affordability to the breaking point. Investors loved Charlotte. It felt stable, diversified, insulated from the volatility plaguing coastal cities. But 2025 has exposed the cracks. Home prices have flattened, and in some neighborhoods, they've started sliding backward. Days on market have stretched into weeks, then months. Sellers are slashing prices, offering to cover closing costs, doing whatever it takes to move inventory that simply isn't moving. The problem isn't a single issue. It's a combination of forces converging all at once. Interest rates remain elevated, locking out first-time buyers. The corporate relocations that fueled the boom have slowed to a trickle, and the suburban sprawl that defined Charlotte's growth is now working against it. Commutes have become unbearable. Infrastructure hasn't kept pace. Schools are overcrowded. The quality of life that attracted people in the first place is eroding under the weight of too many people arriving too quickly. Investors are feeling the squeeze hardest. The single-family rental homes they bought in bulk are no longer appreciating. Renters are pushing back on increases, and vacancies are creeping upward. Property taxes have climbed sharply as local governments scramble to fund services for a population that exploded in just a few years. Some investors are holding on, hoping the market will bounce back. Others are cutting their losses and moving capital elsewhere. Charlotte still looks impressive from a distance, its skyline sharp and modern. But underneath that polish, the math is getting harder to justify. The city that was supposed to offer the best of both worlds, opportunity without chaos, is discovering that rapid growth brings its own set of problems. And when the momentum stops, those problems don't just disappear, they compound. Number 8, Tampa, Florida. Tampa rode the pandemic wave harder than almost anywhere else. The combination of no state income tax, warm weather, and relative affordability compared to Miami made it irresistible. Californians and New Yorkers arrived in droves. Developers couldn't build fast enough. Home prices shot up more than 50% in just 3 years. Investors, both large and small, treated Tampa like a gold rush, snatching up properties with the certainty that values would only climb higher. But the rush is over, and the hangover has begun. By mid-2025, Tampa's housing market is in freefall. Prices have dropped roughly 8% from their peak, and the decline is accelerating. Luxury condos along the waterfront, units that sold for $800,000 at the height of the frenzy, are now listed for $650,000 with no buyers in sight. Suburban developments in places like Wesley Chapel and Riverview are littered with for sale signs that never seem to come down. The reasons are layered but clear. Insurance has become a nightmare. Homeowners are facing annual premiums exceeding $10,000, sometimes more, making monthly housing costs unbearable even for those with decent incomes. The hurricanes didn't help. Each storm season brings fresh anxiety and higher premiums. Properties that were supposed to be investments are now financial traps, costing more to maintain than they generate in rent or appreciation. Investors are bailing. The institutional buyers who dominated Tampa's market during the boom are offloading portfolios at a loss. Smaller landlords, crushed by rising costs and falling rents, are walking away from properties they can no longer afford to hold. Foreclosures are ticking upward, and the new construction that was supposed to ease the housing shortage has instead flooded the market with inventory nobody wants at current prices. Tampa's downtown still sparkles at night. The Riverwalk still draws crowds, But the financial reality beneath the surface is harsh. The city that became a symbol of Florida's unstoppable growth is now a cautionary tale about what happens when speculation outpaces sustainability. The sun still shines, but the shadow of overreach is growing longer every day. Number 7, Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh was supposed to be different. It had tech jobs, top-tier universities, and a reputation for thoughtful growth. Unlike some Sunbelt cities that exploded overnight, Raleigh seemed to expand with intention, balancing development with livability. For years, it worked. But by 2025, even Raleigh couldn't escape the reversal. Home prices have begun falling, down about 7% from their 2023 peak. Inventory is piling up, buyers are vanishing, and the investors who treated Raleigh like a sure thing are now scrambling to adjust. The city's job market, long its strongest asset, is showing signs of strain. Tech layoffs have hit the Research Triangle hard. Startups that were hiring aggressively just a year ago are now downsizing or folding entirely. Without those high-income workers fueling demand, the housing market has lost its engine. Developers who built luxury apartments aimed at young professionals are facing vacancy rates they never anticipated. Buildings that were supposed to fill within weeks of opening are sitting half empty 6 months later. Landlords are offering concessions, free rent, waived fees, anything to attract tenants. But the pool of renters who can afford $2,000 a month has shrunk considerably. Even the suburbs, once considered safe havens for families, are feeling the pressure. Homes in Cary, Apex, and Wake Forest are sitting on the market longer than they have in a decade. Sellers are frustrated. Buyers are cautious, and the optimism that defined Raleigh's housing market for so long has evaporated. Investors are rethinking their positions. The single-family homes they bought expecting steady appreciation are now liabilities. Property taxes have climbed. Maintenance costs are higher than projected, and the rental income they were counting on isn't materializing. Some are holding on, betting the market will recover. Others are selling at a loss, unwilling to wait and see how much worse it might get. Raleigh remains a beautiful city, green and vibrant, with a quality of life many places envy. But beauty doesn't pay the mortgage. And in 2025, even the smartest markets in the Sunbelt are learning that when the tide goes out, everyone gets wet. Number 6, Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville's transformation over the past decade was nothing short of stunning. The city went from a regional music hub to a full-blown boomtown, attracting everyone from tech workers to celebrities. Cranes dominated the skyline, luxury condos replaced dive bars, and housing prices climbed so fast it felt like the city was trying to catch up to its own hype. Investors loved Nashville. It had growth, culture, and a tax-friendly environment. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. By 2025, Nashville's housing market is unraveling. Home prices have dropped nearly 10% from their peak. Condos that sold for $600,000 in 2022 are now listed for $500,000, and still, they're not moving. The luxury apartment towers that define downtown are struggling with vacancies. Units that commanded $3,500 a month are now offering move-in specials and rent discounts just to fill space. The problem is twofold: oversupply and softening demand. Developers built as if the boom would never end. They added thousands of high-end units to a market that didn't have enough high earners to fill them. Meanwhile, the transplants who drove Nashville's growth are slowing down. Remote work made the city attractive during the pandemic, but as companies pull workers back to the office, that advantage has faded. people who moved to Nashville for lifestyle are realizing the cost of living has caught up to the places they left behind. And the jobs aren't there to justify it. Music Row still hums. Broadway still lights up every night. But beneath the neon and the honky-tonks, the financial reality is sobering. Investors who bought properties expecting endless appreciation are now underwater. Small landlords are selling at losses. Corporate buyers are offloading entire portfolios. The single-family rental homes that were supposed to generate passive income are sitting vacant or renting for far less than projected. Property taxes have surged as the city tries to fund infrastructure for a population that grew too fast. Insurance costs are climbing, and the renters who were supposed to support this entire ecosystem are either leaving or negotiating terms that make the numbers impossible for landlords. Nashville's story is a classic case of momentum turning into mania. The city that felt unstoppable is now pausing, catching its breath, and confronting the reality that not every boom is sustainable. The music plays on, but the housing market has hit a very sour note. Number 5, San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio never had the flashy reputation of Austin or Dallas, but it quietly became one of the hottest housing markets in the Sunbelt. Military bases, healthcare jobs, and a steady stream of retirees kept demand solid. Developers took notice and began building aggressively. Between 2020 and 2023, the city added tens of thousands of new housing units, betting that growth would continue indefinitely. But by 2025, that bet is looking shaky. Home prices have started falling, down about 9% from their peak. Rental rates are dropping even faster. Apartment complexes on the north side, areas that were supposed to be the future of the city, are offering unprecedented deals. 2 months free, no deposits, even cash bonuses just for signing a lease. Investors are panicking. The single-family homes they bought in bulk, expecting steady rent checks, are now costing more to maintain than they're bringing in. Property taxes have jumped. Insurance is climbing. And the tenants they were counting on are either moving out or demanding lower rents. Some landlords are trying to hold on, hoping the market stabilizes. Others are cutting their losses and selling, often for less than they paid. The problem is supply. San Antonio built too much too fast without considering whether the local economy could support it. The city's job market, while stable, isn't generating the high-income positions needed to fill luxury apartments and expensive rental homes. Military personnel, a core part of the population, earn steady but modest wages. Retirees are on fixed incomes, and the young professionals who might have moved to San Antonio are choosing cheaper cities instead. The oversupply is so severe that even new construction projects are being paused or canceled. Builders who broke ground 2 years ago are now watching their investments turn into liabilities. The Riverwalk still draws tourists. The Alamo still stands. But the housing market that was supposed to anchor San Antonio's future is crumbling under the weight of unrealistic expectations. Investors who thought they found a hidden gem are learning that even the quietest markets can collapse when the fundamentals don't hold. Number 4, Tucson, Arizona. Tucson might not be as well known as Phoenix or Scottsdale, but during the pandemic, it became a magnet for Californians seeking affordability without sacrificing the Southwest lifestyle. Home prices doubled in some neighborhoods. Investors flooded in, buying properties sight unseen. The city's sleepy reputation was replaced by stories of bidding wars and cash offers, but the frenzy didn't last. By 2025, Tucson's housing market is in full retreat. prices have fallen more than 11% from their peak. Homes that sold for $450,000 2 years ago are now listed for $380,000 and sitting for months without offers. Rental properties are hemorrhaging value. Landlords who bought at the top are now facing negative cash flow. The rents they projected aren't materializing, and the appreciation they counted on has reversed. The reasons are stark. Tucson's economy, heavily reliant on the University of Arizona and tourism, isn't robust enough to sustain the housing prices that speculation created. Wages are low, job growth is sluggish, and the Californians who drove the boom are either moving back or realizing they overpaid for properties that will never appreciate the way they expected. Insurance costs have spiked, particularly for properties near wildfire zones. Water scarcity is becoming a real concern, making long-term investment in the desert feel increasingly risky. And the new housing developments that were supposed to transform Tucson into the next great Sunbelt city are now ghost towns, empty lots with half-built homes and no buyers in sight. Investors are fleeing. The out-of-state buyers who once dominated the market are gone. Local landlords are struggling to keep tenants. And the corporate investors who treated Tucson like a growth opportunity are quietly exiting, unwilling to wait for a recovery that may never come. The mountains still frame the skyline beautifully. The sunsets are still breathtaking, but the financial landscape is bleak. Tucson's housing market was built on hype, not fundamentals. And now that the hype has faded, what's left is a cautionary tale about the dangers of speculation in secondary markets. Number 3, Fort Myers, Florida. Fort Myers experienced one of the most dramatic housing booms in the entire Sunbelt. Nestled along Florida's Gulf Coast, the city became a haven for retirees and remote workers looking for paradise. Between 2020 and early 2023, home prices rocketed upward by more than 60%. Investors treated the market like a jackpot. Developers raced to build luxury communities. Everything felt bulletproof until Hurricane Ian slammed into the region in late 2022. The storm didn't just damage homes, it shattered confidence. By 2025, Fort Myers is in a housing crisis of a different kind. Prices have plummeted roughly 14% from their peak, and the decline shows no sign of stopping. Entire neighborhoods remain damaged or abandoned. Insurance companies have either pulled out of the market entirely or raised premiums to levels that make homeownership financially impossible for most people. Properties that were supposed to be retirement dreams are now financial nightmares. Investors are desperate to sell. Homes that were listed for $700,000 are now being offered at $550,000, and even at those prices, there are few buyers. The people who might have purchased are terrified of the next hurricane. The insurance situation has made financing nearly impossible. Lenders are refusing to approve mortgages without proof of coverage, and coverage is either unavailable or absurdly expensive. Rental properties are faring no better. Landlords are struggling to find tenants willing to pay rates that even come close to covering costs. Many are simply walking away, abandoning properties to foreclosure rather than continuing to pour money into a losing investment. The local economy, heavily dependent on tourism and seasonal residents, is buckling under the weight of climate anxiety. Businesses are closing, jobs are disappearing, and the people who built their lives in Fort Myers are questioning whether staying is even viable. The beaches are still beautiful, the sunsets still paint the sky, but underneath that postcard image is a market in collapse. Fort Myers represents the extreme end of what happens when natural disaster meets financial speculation. Investors who thought they were buying paradise are now holding properties they can't sell, can't rent, and can't afford to keep. The boom reversed so violently that the wreckage is still unfolding. Number 2, Sarasota, Florida. Sarasota had everything: white sand beaches, upscale culture, a reputation as one of the most desirable places to retire in America. During the pandemic, it became even more. Remote workers discovered they could live anywhere, and many chose Sarasota. Home prices soared past $600,000 on average. Luxury condos along the waterfront sold for millions. Investors from across the country bought properties, certain that demand would only grow stronger. But by 2025, Sarasota is experiencing one of the most dramatic reversals in the Sunbelt. Prices have dropped more than 12%, and in some neighborhoods, the decline is closer to 20%. Condos that sold for $1.2 million in 2022 are now listed for $900,000, and still they sit empty. The inventory glut is staggering. Developers who built during the boom are now stuck with unsold units. The reasons are familiar but devastating. Insurance costs have skyrocketed. Annual premiums of $15,000 or more are common, making the total cost of ownership unbearable. Hurricane risk has shifted from abstract to immediate. Each storm season brings dread, and buyers who might have once overlooked the risk are now demanding steep discounts or walking away entirely. The remote work wave that fueled Sarasota's growth has receded. Companies are calling employees back to the office, and the people who moved to Sarasota for lifestyle are realizing they can't justify the cost without the income to support it. Many are selling and moving to cheaper states or back to the cities they left. Investors are panicking. The rental income they projected never materialized. Occupancy rates are dropping, and the properties they bought expecting appreciation are now depreciating faster than they can react. Some are trying to hold on, hoping for a rebound. Others are liquidating, taking losses that wipe out years of gains. Property managers report unprecedented numbers of owners simply handing over keys and walking away. Sarasota still has its charm. The art scene thrives. The beaches remain stunning. But charm doesn't pay the bills, and beauty can't offset financial collapse. The city that symbolized the perfect retirement destination is now a cautionary tale about the fragility of markets built on perception rather than economic reality. Investors who thought Sarasota was a safe bet are learning that when risk becomes real, even paradise can turn into a trap. Number 1, Cape Coral, Florida. At the very top of this list, the city experiencing the most brutal housing reversal in the entire Sunbelt is Cape Coral. This sprawling Florida community, built on a network of canals and marketed as an affordable waterfront paradise, became ground zero for speculative excess during the pandemic. Home prices tripled in some neighborhoods. Investors from across the globe bought properties, often without even visiting. The city became synonymous with easy money and endless sunshine, but by 2025, Cape Coral is in complete meltdown. Home prices have collapsed by more than 18% from their peak, one of the steepest drops anywhere in the country. Properties that sold for $500,000 2 years ago are now struggling to fetch $400,000. And even at those prices, buyers are scarce. The reasons are catastrophic and compounding. Hurricane Ian devastated Cape Coral in 2022. Entire neighborhoods were flooded, homes were destroyed, and while some rebuilding happened, many properties were simply abandoned. Insurance became either impossible to obtain or so expensive that ownership stopped making financial sense. premiums of $20,000 a year or more are now common, making monthly costs higher than many mortgages. Investors who bought in bulk during the boom are now liquidating in panic. The rental market has evaporated. Tenants aren't willing to pay rates that even come close to covering costs. Vacancies are at record highs, and the properties that are occupied often have tenants who can barely afford current rents, let alone increases. Foreclosures are surging. Entire streets are lined with abandoned homes, properties that banks don't even want to take back because there's no market to sell them into. The canal system that was supposed to make Cape Coral unique is now a liability. Water quality issues, insurance risk, and maintenance costs make waterfront properties more burden than blessing. The local economy, almost entirely dependent on real estate and tourism, is collapsing. Businesses are shutting down, jobs are vanishing, and the people who moved to Cape Coral for the dream are waking up to a nightmare. The city that was supposed to represent the pinnacle of Sunbelt opportunity has become the clearest example of what happens when speculation runs completely unchecked. Investors are fleeing in numbers that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The properties they bought expecting wealth have become anchors, dragging them into debt. Cape Coral is more than a housing crash. It's a symbol of the Sunbelt bubble bursting in real time. The canals still reflect the Florida sky. The palm trees still sway. But the financial devastation is undeniable. What was built on dreams and leverage is now collapsing under the weight of reality. Across the Sunbelt, a painful reckoning is underway. The cities that were supposed to define America's future are now grappling with the consequences of believing their own hype. Investors who poured billions into these markets are discovering that growth has limits, that speculation has costs, and that not every boom lasts forever. For years, the narrative was simple. People were leaving high-tax states, moving to places with sunshine, low regulation, and opportunity. And for a while, that story was true. But it was never the whole truth. Beneath the surface, the Sunbelt was building on shaky ground. Wages didn't keep pace with housing costs. Infrastructure couldn't support the population surge. Insurance markets buckled under climate risk. And developers built far more than the economy could realistically absorb. Now the reversal is accelerating. Prices are falling, investors are fleeing, and the cities that once symbolized limitless growth are learning what every market eventually learns. Gravity always wins. The question now isn't whether the correction will continue, it's how deep it will go and how long it will last. For those who bought at the peak, the pain is just beginning. For those who waited, opportunity may be emerging. But one thing is certain, the Sunbelt boom is over. What comes next will define these cities for a generation. If this breakdown opened your eyes to what's really happening in America's housing market, make sure to share this video and drop a comment with your thoughts. The numbers don't lie, and the story is far from over.